Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. All right, on today's edition of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Eric Filar, one of the famous Filarski brothers. Eric has been around in the off-road 4x4 industry for a really long time, the builder of a couple of really badass rigs that we'll talk about, and then also raced Jeep Speed, is a comedian at heart, and let's get started. So thank you so much for coming on board this morning, Eric. Hopefully you're healthy and happy, and are you still the mayor?
Thanks for having me on, Rich. I mean, I don't know how you must really be grasping at straws to bring me on, but I am still the mayor. I'm still super active in my little local community here. But
excellent.
All very happy and healthy and happy. I'll put an exclamation point on it. So I'm always super stoked to be just out and about, having a good time, and love what I do and love being me, man.
Awesome. Let's jump right into it with both feet. Where did you grow up?
Well, I'm still growing up. What do you mean?
Yeah. Okay. Where were you born, and where did you go to school?
I was born and raised in a tiny little beach community called Ventura, California, in Southern California. There, I grew up, and my dad owned an auto parts store, a Big A auto parts store. Actually, in fact, my whole family, from my great uncle and great aunt, all came from kind of auto parts, and here I am, still working for Motive Gear, still in auto parts. Essentially, my great aunt and uncle had a big part of AC Delco way back in the day. Before that, sold to a conglomerate, and then eventually had a chain or owned part or bought into the chain of Big A Auto Parts. And then one day my dad also followed suit and owned his own Big A Auto Parts. And that's where I grew up, crawling around on diapers, sweeping floors, and stocking shelves and auto parts stores. So I just, I don't know if it's in the blood or you just can't get out of the industry.
I think you can't get out of the industry.
Yeah.
I spent some time in auto parts, but
yeah. I don't know. I think it's fun. It's ever changing, and you stick with it long enough, you get to do all the fun stuff that I do these days.
Yep. Yeah. I walked away from auto parts when I retired from a real job when I left CSK Auto Parts, which is now part of O'Reilly's, to start CalRocks back in. So 2000.
You're kind of what put us out of business then, because of
well, I was only there a year. I was there a year and like 4 days. They didn't.
I did my share of working at a Pep Boys, and I think I did an O'Reilly's, or maybe it was a Checkers back then, but I think they're the same.
Yeah.
But that was what eventually kind of put us, my dad's business eventually under, is an O'Reilly's opened up directly across the street, and a real auto parts guy kind of wasn't necessary anymore. You could hire any joker kid off the street, and he could ask you the color of his car and that kind of thing, and get you the wrong part, and then you just come back and return it.
Exactly. With the grease prints when you figure it out that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So how long did you spend in Ventura?
I actually I grew up in Ventura all the way through high school. And eventually moved to Phoenix, Arizona when I was almost 18, I think, or at least right at 18 to go to school. I went to a Universal Technical Institute, which was the only one they had back then. Now there's a bunch of those schools. And then from there went to Colorado and then moved back to Ventura and here I am and still in Southern California, 150 miles away from there, out here in the desert, so I could go, so I could be closer to all the rock crawling and desert stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And Southern California has it, that's for sure.
Yeah, yes. That's everyone can complain about Southern California. I don't mind paying the taxes for 350. Well, I mean, I do mind paying the taxes. I don't mind paying my share of the taxes for 350 days of sunshine, and I can be at the Hammers. I can go, from my house, I can be at the Hammers in the morning, go surfing in the afternoon, skiing later that day, and down in Baja before sunset. So I love little Wildemar, California that I live into. It's the best out here.
Yeah, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, went to college in Santa Barbara, spent a lot of time, 3.5, 4 years down in that Ventura, Oxnard, Santa Barbara area.
Right on.
And then went up, worked in San Francisco for a little bit, and then went up into the foothills to Placerville. So I understand the whole, at least 3 of those. Surf in the morning, water ski, snow ski.
Yeah,
the
totally.
only thing I couldn't, hit the Rubicon. The only thing I couldn't do was get to Baja.
9 hours from the Baja, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a rough life. Too bad politics have gone the way they have in that state. Otherwise,
yeah, total bummer.
Yep. Anyhow, so what was your first exposure to off-road?
Literally born into it. And I'll take that one step further. My twin brother and I, Ryan,
Yep,
were conceived in the, mom and dad like to party. They were conceived we were conceived in the back of a Chevy Love truck on Pismo Beach, which is, if anybody knows Pismo Beach, right now, within the next 5 years, it'll be gone, but it was the only beach in California that you can still drive on and go run the dunes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, literally conceived, and I won't tell my mom I told you this, but I've got three brothers and sisters that were on a sheet of plywood on top of the bed while they were underneath it, making whoopee. And but yeah, so and the reason we went to the dunes because we had my dad was big into Volkswagen Baja bugs,
right.
And so we'd flat tail, the kids would sit in the back of the, drive 2 hours from Ventura or Oxnard and in the back of a Chevy Love, flat tailing a Baja bug, and we go ripping shit up in the dunes. So that's how we grew up. We grew up on ATCs and dirt bikes and that kind of stuff, going everywhere from San Francisco Canyon or like the Canyonlands area that was close to Ventura. And then, I remember spending a ton of time in Pismo. That was like our go-to. It was always fun to just go blast the dunes. Now, back then the dunes were big. Now they're only like a couple miles long. Back then they were, it was a long stretch of the beach that you still got to drive on.
Right. No, I can remember one of my first trips down to Santa Barbara to drop my all my stuff off when I was going to college down there. I had a 54 Volkswagen Bug. It was a street car, but I decided to take it on the sand dunes on the way down. I had the passenger seat out and the back seat was already decked out, and it was full of all of my stuff, my stereo system and everything else. And I went and played on the beaches down there. And
yeah, you could.
It was a long drive. Yeah.
Yeah, if you stay in the small stuff, you could probably take, a street bug down there and have a great time, as long as you can get across that one water crossing.
Yeah, that was a surprise. I got across it twice, but it was quite the surprise the first time I hit it. Didn't realize it was as deep as it was.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, that's how I was introduced, was probably, besides Volkswagen Baja bugs and ATCs, man, we had those ATCs. It was probably like a 115 or a 185. I don't know what it was, but didn't have the front suspension. We didn't have anything fancy, but those things I kind of still wish I had one so I could put my kids on there and let them beat themselves up. But without a front suspension, there's big bubble tires and they just beat the teeth out of you.
Right. So you grew up and you survived that. I'll bet you drank out of garden hoses too.
Yeah.
Riding
Yeah,
in the back of a pickup truck without
I definitely
seatbelts.
love those memes. Yeah. We grew up in the back of a pickup truck. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So when you were going to school, did you participate in any sports or any school activities, or was it all about working at the shop?
I was definitely not a scholar student. I was kind of a poor student. I like to, I want to say just in high school, but I'm pretty sure it was my entire school career. I liked screwing off more than I liked going to school. And I don't tell my kids that. I always tell them what a great student I was. But in high school, I was not a sports guy. Me and my buddy Ron always joke about, one ball sports versus two ball sports. And I'm a two ball sports guy. Yeah, Ron.
Yes.
I'm a two ball sports guy. If you got a sport that takes two balls to do it, like off-road racing, count me in, but one ball sports isn't enough for me. But so I was just a big, I was a Jeep dork. As a freshman, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license and probably, before that always cracks me up when I think about it, but I'd seen, and everybody has seen the movie Back to the Future.
Right.
And when I saw, I forget what's his name, but when I saw Marty McFly's black Toyota, I had the biggest boner for that thing, man. A shiny black Toyota on probably like 33s or something. And that was going to be my car when I got, I was going to do that. I was going to get a Toyota and lift it. And my dad luckily saved me from that because he says, you can do whatever you want, son, but I won't help you buy a foreign car. But if you get a domestic car like a Jeep or a Chevy, then I'll front the money and you can pay me back. So I was like, well, that answers that question. Sounds like we're getting a Jeep.
Yeah,
so
your dad saved you.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be running around in first gear, screaming off the off the rev limiter and 1,000-to-1 ratios right now, probably if it wasn't for that.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, other than that, and I mean, in high school, no sports, just Jeep stuff. Once I finally got a Jeep, all I did was, I wasn't a very good student, so I drove Jeeps and chased, tail and probably, we did some recreational other things. It was all fun, but my dad used to always tell me, if you ever knock it, he said, if you fall over and crack your head open, I bet a bunch of pussies would run out. And I said, yeah, Dad, that's right.
So was Ryan right there with you doing all this, or?
Yeah, we both had in high school back then. We kind of ran in different crowds. I was a little more rough around the edges, or I don't know what it.
More of the wild child.
That. Yeah, exactly. I would probably never got in like go to jail crazy, trouble or anything, but I wasn't afraid to go out and party and figure things out. And Ryan was a little more mellow like that, but we still had Jeeps. So on the weekends when Dad had a Jeep, we would all go Jeeping together, and then come Monday morning, I'd be figuring out how to write my, dismissal from class and sign my dad's name so I could go out and do whatever it was that I was doing in those days.
See, what I did in high school is I joined yearbook staff. And so as a photographer, and I was able to write passes for me and my friends to go do whatever we wanted. Because I just put on there that we're going out to do yearbook stuff. And the teachers were all like, go ahead and do it. Plus it got me all 4 years of my English requirement. But that's probably why I speak the way I do and write the way I do.
Yeah, see, you're a lot smarter than I was, because I would just try and be home around the time I knew that the attendance lady would call. And I can only imagine back then when I would answer the phone and be like, hello. It probably sounded like a 8-year-old answering the phone. Hello. Yeah, no, I'm his dad.
Too funny. So then, what was your first vehicle then? You said Jeeps.
Yeah, my first vehicle was a 1981 Jeep CJ7 that I think we bought for like $3,200, which is hilarious because you can't touch a CJ7 for less than half of that now, even if it's barely running. Yeah, so CJ7, and I want to say it already had like a lift and tires on it. I think it already had a lift and 33-inch tires. And like I said, I had that boner for 33-inch tires, which was those were monster truck tires back then.
Yep.
And I remember my dad would always complain. Anything that happened to that Jeep, I'd be like, "Oh man, I burned the clutch up," because probably I wasn't very good at driving clutches back then. And he'd be like, "It's those goddamn big tires." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, Dad." And then it'd run out of. We'd go on family vacations. We'd drive all the way to Colorado when we were 16. I'd be in my Jeep, my brother would be in his Jeep, my mom and dad in their Jeep, and we were up to heading off to go do like the Telluride tour, and there was some other rotary thing, but anyway, we would go up there and we'd camp for 2 weeks, and that was our family vacation. Three goofballs in a Jeep, or three goofballs in a Jeep and mom. They had 5 speeds. I only had a 4-speed. So top it all off, I'm like burning way more fuel. But the second I would run out of fuel, I'd be like, "Those goddamn big tires. I told you, son." All right, whatever. But then I only had that for like a couple of years. And then when I was 17, so probably not less than a couple of years, really, when I was 17, and I'll tell you, if anyone's listening and can remember this magazine article, he'd really do me a solid, which is funny because I know no one's going to listen to this one, Rich. Sorry.
Oh, that's not correct.
But yeah, there was a magazine article of a Cherokee chief back in, this would have been like 93-ish or somewhere around there. So 1993, there was an article in one of the off-road magazines, probably like Peterson's or something. And it was an all desert race Cherokee chief. So like a late 70s Cherokee chief, and it was all red. And I remember, it's burned in my soul. The article was called Cherry Bomb because everything was red. And it was this, the center fold was this red, bright red Cherokee chief just cutting off of this lip and sending it. And when I read that and saw that, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to go desert racing. I want to do it with this Cherokee because this thing is awesome. And then so I ended up trading my 81 CJ7 straight across with another guy that had a 77 Cherokee Chief. And then it turned out that I was only 16 or 17 and didn't have the money to do any of that stuff. So now I'm back to jeeping and rock crawling in this big, junky Cherokee Chief. But if anybody can find that article, I would love to see it, and because I still want to build that exact vehicle. And now I've got the money to do it. So
I'll bet somebody will find it.
Yeah, please, somebody contact me with the race Cherokee from the 90s.
Awesome. Cherry Bomb. So then
that was the article. Yeah.
So that's probably the vehicle that you took to Phoenix?
Yes.
Did it have AC working?
No, it absolutely did not. And I tell you, I have such fond memories of living in Phoenix for that few years, and all of the people that I've met and all the people that I still am such great friends with. But while I was there, I could not have been more disappointed because it was so hot. And, I'm driving this big, dopey Jeep Cherokee that I don't even know if it ever had air conditioning, or I might have been dumb enough to turn it into an air compressor pump at that point. And, and yeah, so that's at 18 years. I'm driving around a gas hog, and although gas was good back then, and it's 120, which is something a beach kid has never experienced in his life. Yeah. So like I said,
but it's a dry heat.
Yeah. Well, see, and I live where it's hot now, and I tell people, but it's a dry heat. Don't worry, and they don't get it. Now I get it.
Yeah, what I always say about a dry heat, so is my oven.
Mm-hmm. Where I live now, I go, it'll be 114 at the worst. It'll get to like 100 and the 110s here, and only for like a week. But as long as you're not working on a car, Everything's awesome, man. You can drink beer in the shade all day at 114, and it's really not that bad.
Especially if you're married, you have all that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, what was your major? Well, you were at a Universal Technical Institute there. So, what was? Did you
Oh, yeah.
have a direction you went with that?
I mean, so like I said, I grew up in auto parts. I grew up as a car dork. My dad was a car dork. He kind of like, I probably could have skipped going there in hindsight, but I think I like to think I still used that degree. It was automotive and diesel technology, which is still like I still sell, automotive drivetrain parts for Motor Gear, and we have a heavy duty side called Transamerican, and we sell Transamerica heavy duty drivetrain parts. So I still use both of those on my daily routine because I when I'm not in the office, I'm usually inside this office talking on the phone and doing tech calls and sales and that kind of stuff one week, and then the next week I'm out on the road, shaking hands and kissing babies and that kind of stuff. But I still got to go and use all that heavy duty lingo. And I still always enjoy the light duty side because that's still my passion as far as not only in sales, but also in, that's what I do on weekends. I go out and I try and break light duty parts.
Perfect, because you got to do destruction testing, right?
Yeah, it's exactly what I taught, and and that's a big part of my position here at Motive Gear, and that's one thing I always like about Motive Gear is that like they're big on developing, and they're very pro development, very pro like go out and test it, see what we can do, where can we make it better, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to go out and do donuts and jump and see what I can break and bend and how hard I can push this stuff. So if you guys are cool with it, I'll see you next week.
So then from out of Phoenix, what was your next stop?
So from out of Phoenix, I moved on these when we were growing up. Like I said, my dad owned an auto parts store, and we would go on because it was a small big A auto parts store. He could only really split for 2 weeks. He had his right hand man, and he could only leave for 2 weeks, and he couldn't like take a week this month and maybe a week in a couple months. It had to be really well planned. So we would always vacation for 2 weeks straight, and that vacation consisted of getting in the back of a single cab Toyota pickup with a camper shell, and we drove and camped across the country. I mean, we spent more time driving, and my parents, I know they had good intentions. They wanted to show us the country, so they took us to all the monuments, and we camped near DC one time and saw all those monuments. But at that age, I could not have given less of a shit about the monuments.
Right.
So my favorite part about all those vacations of driving all from the West Coast to the East Coast and back is we would always stop in a little town called Durango, Colorado. And that was where we at least spent 2 or 3 days. So my fondest memories was like I like Durango, Colorado now, because that's where we would at least stop, and we weren't driving in this Toyota or a Jeep or whatever we were in. This is our time to hang out by the river and pretend to fish because we're terrible fisher persons. And so when I got done with Universal with UTI, my intention was I'm moving to Colorado. I'm going to pack it up and go straight to Durango and start my life jeeping there and that kind of thing. So yeah, after I graduated, I moved to Durango, Colorado. And actually, let me back up. Before I moved to Durango, I was so we were Jeep guys, and we would go in Phoenix. We would go to we'd go to all the Jeep events. So there was like the Association Run and Spook Rally and all these Arizona events that we would still go to on weekends. And that was actually where that's where I met Shannon Campbell, and eventually I got to know Randy Ellis really well. And after watching shit, I don't think I met Shannon until after I met Randy. I met Randy at FST back when he was working for FST, and I had read a magazine article that had I think Shannon's old
Pinky.
No, it was before Pinky.
Wow.
So his old at the time, I think it was the bronze or like a Coors colored 3/4 elliptic. I think it was still a flat fender, if I remember right. It was a flat fender, and it had a 2x3 tube frame and a cage and just junkyard axles and that kind of stuff. And when I read that article, I was like, oh my God, like I have to build something like this. I've been trying to rock crawl this stupid Cherokee Chief. I need to build something small and fun, and I was young and dumb and didn't realize how much money it was going to cost me.
Even with junkyard parts.
Yeah, well, not even junkyard parts. I had already had a Cherokee Chief, which had 44s and a V8 and that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, I'm going to tear this Cherokee Chief apart, build a frame. So I'm working at a truck shop, and every night I would literally I would go to school at 7 a.m, and you'd get off, you'd be done with school 4 or 5 hours later. So around 1 or 2 or something. And then from 2, I would drive across town in Arizona, in Phoenix, which used to be an enormous pain because there was only one or two freeways, the 10 and the 17 back then. Now there's loops, 101s and 202s and 303s and 51s and all that stuff. But I would go to work a full 8-hour shift on these big rigs, changing out either R&R and transmission or clutches and that kind of stuff, and adjusting all this garbage. But then I would get off at 9 or 10, and I would work till 3 or 4 in the morning cutting metal and making my frame and tearing apart this Cherokee Chief and building. I was building a CJ5, like an older CJ5, but with a tube frame, and I was sold on quarter elliptic, so I was doing link systems and that always, I didn't know what I was doing, but it was fun to do. So I built my first 4-link and custom chassis and everything when I was still 18 years old.
Wow.
And I got I can't remember their names, but the guys that own that truck shop must have just had, I don't know how they could have possibly trusted me that much, but I was just there. I had the keys to the shop. I lived there to make this Jeep, and then I would sleep 2 hours and go to school and then start that over again. And that was my old junky CJ5 rock crawler way back in the day, which I sold to a guy named Serge Adhura, I think. Serge.
Oh,
he's a Facebook friend. Really nice guy.
yeah.
Hey, I think he's
up out of the Sacramento, San Francisco area.
Yeah,
the Russians.
Yeah, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Sergi. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Then I know that rig.
Yeah, I think he painted it. He might have painted it green and black. It was orange and black when I had it and sold it to him, and it was he really liked it, and I really liked it until but when I think back of how I did things, I did it all with a torch and a welder. That was it. So when I really got to know Randy and Shannon and saw how they would do things, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm building such garbage. And I always give credit to Randy, because the first time he saw my garbage, he was like, no, I think that's good. At least, it's absolute dog shit, but you were thinking out of the box. You figured out how to do this. And I was like, oh, thanks, dude.
Exactly. So when you were up in Durango, what were you doing work-wise up in that area?
So when I first moved to Durango, I was still only 18 and a half or 19, maybe. I was probably 19. And I put together a resume, and my resume consisted of me going to school and being a know-it-all, and with some pictures of this Jeep that I'd built, and I got picked up by a place in Durango called Durango Truck and Off-Road Outfitters or something like that.
Okay.
And worked for a guy named Andy, and like I said, I was a total know-it-all. I still am. I just know how to suppress it now. So I worked for him for, I don't know, the better part of a year. And then we got into a fuck you competition. And, the owner of the company always wins those. So I ended up, our competition was a company called, a tiny little off-road company called Avalanche Engineering, owned by Steve Ramore.
Yep.
And I'd been wheeling as they were competition, I'd gotten to know Steve just in passings, and kind of started going wheeling with him every once in a while because he had this round tube chassis CJ6 that he built. So I've got this rectangular tube chassis, thinking I'm all fucking hot shit. And he's got this round tube chassis CJ6 with like big tires. But when I would look at it, I'd be like, ugh, that's not how I would do it. So when I got fired, or I can't remember, I was pretty sure I probably got fired or asked to leave anyway from Durango Truck. I went to Steve, and Steve was like, "Oh yeah, fuck, I'll give you a job right now." So I went to work for Steve, and actually lived in the shop. There was a really crummy little like upstairs apartment that had more rats than I had cans of food because I didn't have any money. But so then I started working for Avalanche Engineering, and there's so much more to that story. But I'd met my good buddy Drew Barber,
Right.
Who worked at an auto shop, auto repair shop right next to that Durango truck place. So I knew Drew really well, and eventually got Drew to come over to Avalanche. I forget how that all went down, but eventually he came over, and that was when we started making. We made all kinds of things actually, but the one that people might remember is when we started making the Sniper, which in hindsight, I always think, God, what an ugly car. But let me know if I'm getting too far ahead of you.
No, not at all.
The Sniper, I'm trying to remember the guy's name that we built the very first one for. He owned the Badlands Off-Road Park, and I think he may have passed away a handful of years ago now from cancer.
Troy Myers.
Troy Myers, yes, Troy Myers. So Troy Myers had seen Sonny Honegger's Scorpion, yeah. So he had seen Troy Myers' Scorpion Sonny Honegger's Scorpion, and he liked a lot of things about it, but he liked some of the like the quarter. We were doing quarter. It was back in the day, kind of just following Shannon's footsteps, really, but quarter elliptic. So we were doing we were experimenting with airbags. We were doing all kinds of stuff back then. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just looking for something that would work. And you'd watch what Shannon would do, or Sonny, or or Randy Ellis was always I don't know if you know Randy, but
yes,
I still hang out with Randy all the time, and he's just such a legitimate dude. But like back in that day, he was starting to mix Jeeps and desert racing, and so was Shannon actually. So I was watching, like I had a keen eye for all that stuff. I wanted to see. Randy was the one that showed me how to, and it's still the same way I do it to today, 25 years later, how to design a four-link system. And I remember back in like the Pirate 4x4 days when everybody was dorking out on anti-squats and this and that, and it's all important stuff. But man, they were really nerding out on that. And I'm like, well, this is how I do it. And it still works really good. But then when I watch how your guys' stuff is working, like it's super unpredictable. So I'm just going to stay with my that I learned from Randy, that I stole from Randy.
Right.
But it was really just desert. It was a desert link system that still worked if you go slow, but it worked really well going fast, and the cars reacted well. So anyways, back to the Sniper. Troy Myers comes to Avalanche from wherever they were, like he was way back east, and wants to build something similar to Sonny's Scorpion, but didn't want the suspension and all that stuff. So we came up with the Sniper. And like I said, I like Sonny. I just don't like the look of that Scorpion or our Sniper. And it was just, it was me and Drew just, doing what we were asked to do, but with our own little flair. So we tried to give it, some appearance. A story I want to tell you real quick was, and it carried on. And I don't know if anybody, this could just be me patting myself on the back here. If anybody knows, so if you remember the sniper back in the day, it had like those eyebrows. It had that look.
Right.
And that carried on through a handful of different cars that I built in the future after that. And it seemed like every car in Northern California, anyway, or all the new buggy builder guys started doing that, where they'd put the little eyebrows in it.
Right. They'd lower that center section of the roof.
And it gave it, it kind of gave it a cool look. It did kind of make some things a pain in the ass, but the reason we did that is my old CJ5 that I built in Phoenix. I had a tire on the roof. Another idea I think I stole from Shannon. But I had a tire on the roof, and I was in New Mexico. We were crawling rocks, and I'd rolled it over backwards. Maybe it was in Moab. I forget. I'd rolled it over backwards, and that tire on the roof turns out to be a really bad idea, because what it does is it pushes the center of the cage down.
Right.
And so when it bent the cage, it bent it down with a set of eyebrows. Well, me being a stupid kid with no money, I couldn't really afford to go buy any like a bunch of tubing to go build a new cage, or for a long time I didn't anyway. But I can't have this roll cage. Looks very unsafe. So I just stuck a tube in between the bend and the dash bar. So now it had this eyebrows with a tube that came down. And when we were building the sniper, we're like, we always kind of laughed at how like it looked angry. Hey, your CJ5 looks angry.
So what you're saying is you're the one to blame for the angry grills.
Oh man, I hope not. I surely hope not.
Well, I'm going to stick to that. That's my story now.
But you know who I also, as long as we're talking about like super bad taste, was I always blame what eventually I think became known as the boner bar, or what I always called it, those big, goofy, stupid loops that everybody puts on the front of their bumpers.
Yep.
On Shannon Campbell. Because when Shannon would show up at the, he always had that, he had like the front bumper would ramp up, and it was about as high as the grill, or maybe a little bit lower. And it was always a smooth transition. And then I don't know who, but someone, let's just call him asshole, decided that should be a bigger loop. And then the next guy was like, oh yeah, your loop's big? Well, mine's going to be this big. Until they were like 6-foot boner bars, just big loops. And I mean, how long did that trend last? Like 10 years. It's still out there.
It still is, yes.
Stupid Shannon.
I'm surprised he doesn't have one on his KOH cars.
Yeah. I think he looked around and was like, what are you idiots doing? I'm not going to do this anymore. Yeah, that's how the sniper kind of came around. Me and Drew, and I know Steve gets a lot of credit for it, and he should, because he owned the company and he did have input on it for sure, and I'm sure plenty of it. I just don't, it was me and Drew building it, so I don't really remember how much. I do remember the start of the chassis, because Steve was an engineer and he liked drag racing, so I remember he'd read a like drag racing chassis building guide or something.
Okay.
And I remember he was like, this is how the chassis needs to build or start. We're going to build a square, which is kind of how they do it these days too.
Yep.
Back then was not how we did it. So it's like, we built a square. So we built a square, and I remember like, no, that's stupid. But in hindsight, it actually was not a terrible idea. And then we just cut the middle of the square out for the drivetrain to come through, and built the rest of the car. And I don't know, it was good days. We were just doing whatever we could to kind of, I don't know, we're really just having fun building stuff. I think it was kind of exciting back then.
Yeah, because everything was brand new. I mean, everything that you guys produced there, or Shannon or Randy did with the Red Racer with the 4-wheel independent, All
Yeah.
that stuff was just so new and all experimental. Nobody was copying really anybody because everybody was doing something different or new.
Um,
You know,
I definitely had a keen eye on like what Shannon was doing and what Randy was doing and what some of the top guys were doing. And that was actually all after like rock crawling competitions had started already. I remember our first rock crawling competition, like we read about it in a magazine, like it was before the internet. So it was like a 1/3 page about this rock crawling competition that was going to take place in, I think, New Mexico, Las Cruces, I think.
yep, Las Cruces.
And we used to go to Las Cruces a lot because we were only like 6 hours from there. And so I wanted to do it in my little CJ5 buggy, but again, like I was a broke kid. And Steve, who really wasn't that much older than I was, he probably 5 to 7 years older maybe. He had his CJ6, and we were like, well, let's go do this. Let's enter this thing. So Steve and I took his little white CJ, or little big monstrous white CJ6, stretched CJ6, to that competition, and that was the very first one. I forget who put it on, but it was
Bob Hazel.
Was it Bob Hazel? I was thinking it was Phil Howe, but maybe Phil Howe started it and Bob took it from there.
Well, Phil started the concept of ARCA, and he was talking to it was a combination of him and Phil and Hazel. Phil didn't like the way the rules were set up, and so they parted ways after that first one. So yeah, it was a combination of the two.
Okay, I kind of remember it like it switched hands before it even happened, so that would kind of make sense, I think.
Yep.
I'm not really sure, but I just remember it cracks me up that it was before the internet. You had to literally like probably peel the entry thing, like cut it out of the magazine and send in your entry. and dude, those were good times. So like we drive all the way to Las Cruces, and Shannon's already there and Randy's there, and we were all just goofballs back then. Still are, really. But so we're gonna essentially party till 3 a.m, and we got to be there at 7 or 4, and it might have been 6 a.m. until we get there. And then you loaded coolers and put them in the back of these Jeeps and went rock competitioning. And I remember there was one picture, and I think it went into the magazine, of Shannon like standing it straight up on end, and his cooler fell out, and there was beers everywhere in the picture. And that's when the rules changed. Now we can't be having so many beers in these pictures. So that was I always get a kick out of how much fun we had back then.
Things definitely changed over the years, from people hanging onto the vehicles, standing on them, outrigger like on a sailboat. I mean,
I don't know if you remember, because I think it was before you started We Rock and that kind of stuff. But back when Chris Durham still had Moose spotting for him.
Oh yeah.
And he Moose pushed that whole front of the Jeep like back down onto the ground. Like it rolled over almost backwards, but it stood there, and Moose pushed that whole Jeep, because that guy was a monster, and ended up like hanging onto the Jeep as it fell back onto its tires and just slammed him up against the hood. And I mean, it was painful to watch, but also amazing at the same time.
Yep.
But yeah, that stuff doesn't fly anymore.
No, I can remember, was it Cedar City, the first Cedar City ARCA event, which Phil Howe started ARCA, and then Ranch Pratt bought it from him before the first event as a good way to advertise for Terraflex. And so then Ranch put that on, but I was the club president in Cedar City, Utah, and we helped Ranch get there and all that kind of stuff. And Lance, Clifford, and Bob Rogie were competing. Bob was driving. Lance stepped on the fire extinguisher while outriggering and got shot in the face from the fire extinguisher. No helmets, just a lap belt. Just crazy stuff.
I mean, that's how Bob Rogie, God, I love that guy. And that's how I first met him, was in the rock crawl. I want to say the first time I remember meeting him was at one of the ones at Chokecherry in Farmington, New Mexico.
Okay.
And I've known him ever since. And yeah, great guy. I've met so many fantastic people through not only just this industry, but from those rock crawling days and my desert racing stuff that I've done in the last 15 years or whatever it is. And it's just so many fantastic people that are like in this industry. It's I can't talk highly enough. Back when we were competing, I would have talked all kinds of shit. I'm like, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's an asshole, and he's rich, or he's got more time, or he's cheating, or he's cherry picking, or whatever. But now when I look back at it, I'm like, oh man, I love all those guys. It was great to, and I still do. It's great to see them every time we all come together, or whether it's a SEMA or Off-Road Expo or a rock crawling event or desert or whatever it is.
Yep. That's what I missed about this last year, 2020, was no Easter Jeep, no SEMA, no Off-Road Expo, none of the big shows, the big organized trail rides. It really sucked. I was surprised that we were able to get our season done with. And the same thing with Ultra 4.
Yeah, totally. I've been watching all you guys, and I've been surprised that anything was happening. And even with the big one coming up with KOH, after they screwed the snore race or whichever one that was in Laughlin that just happened a few weeks ago, I'm like, well, if they can do that, what's next? It's a bunch of BS. But
yeah, that's interesting how they sent the gaming. The state sent the gaming commission in and said, okay, we can't stop them but you can, because you can threaten to pull their license. That was some shady stuff going on there.
Shady, super shady. Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. I hope Dave's able to pull it off. The way they're doing the testing and everything. It's only those that are going into Hammer Town and buying a wristband to get in there have to test. So everybody else will be on their own, and we'll see how that flies with the state. But hopefully,
I should go check the mail actually, because I pre-ordered mine so I could do it at home. But
perfect.
We'll see.
And then let's move on to after those avalanche days.
Oh,
when did you? I know that you're friends with Ron Stobaugh. You mentioned him earlier. You guys got into before Jeep Speed. Let's get into the whole Bronco thing and.
Oh yeah. So again, I can't stress to you enough how much smarter I am these days, and being able to hold my opinions back. So when I worked at Avalanche, we're all headstrong people, and Steve was a headstrong person as well. And so we would talk about, I built John Gilliland's first rock buggy before the Carnivore that my buddy Drew had built. And I think it debuted at the first one was the Phoenix. The first time maybe only time we ever did it, that there was a rock crawling championship in Phoenix. But through that whole time, I had John Gilliland on my side. He knew, or he felt, whether he knew it or not, he felt I knew what I was doing. So if I had an idea, he'd be like, yeah, totally, let's do that. And then Steve would run in and he'd be like, I don't know about that. I'm like, a customer wants to side with me, we should do it. And so I got kind of tired of that. And my not yet wife was going to school in Durango, and she was about to graduate. And I was like, let's move back to Ventura and open a shop. I want to open a fab shop. I'm a smart young man, and I can open a fab shop.
As we know, many people have done in the past.
Yeah, I always admire the ones that were successful, man. It's amazing. So I moved back to Ventura with my actually we'd gotten married right before we moved back to Ventura. So moved back to Ventura, and I opened up my shop, which was Fat City Off-Road Enterprises, and Fat City Off-Road Engineering. That's right. And my first order of business was, I'm going to build a rock. I need a showpiece. So I built a rock crawler, similar to kind of like John Gilliland's, as far as it had a CJ5 tub, I think. It had a glass CJ5 tub, and it was a 2x3 or 2x4, I forget. Tube chassis and a good looking cage, and I didn't have like a ton of money, although I did put good shocks on it. I forget. I built a it was shoot, what would you call it? It was a dual shackle, 4-link dual shackle. So it's still used, like back then it was a Wrangler leaf spring over that we would use a lot.
Right.
Because they would flex well and they were soft. And but I had a shackle on each end, the front and the rear, the spring, and then a 4-link, and that was same front and rear as a shackled leaf spring front and rear and 4-links front and rear. And started taking that. I actually ended up halfway through building it, I sold it to a guy, and he was always super supportive. Tom Millen was his name, is his name still. And so Tom Millen bought it and funded finishing it. So then we finished it. We would use it at all the shows. I think we went to the very first Off-Road Expo back when Bob Bauer had just started that. And we'd go to TDS, and that was my showpiece. He'd let me take that. He'd almost let me take it anywhere. I took it to like association runs and, or Arizona association run, that kind of stuff.
That's always a good friend and customer.
Yeah, exactly. I still to this day, because I still ran, I was young, dumb. So I would still run the shit out of it. But I knew what it was capable of, and it was on like 39-inch boggers. Boggers was the go-to. You had to have boggers back then, for a while anyway.
Till we grew up.
Yeah, till you grew up. Yeah, I'll tell you, the very first rock crawling, I think it was probably the second rock crawling, I forget which one it was, that happened in Chokecherry, if I remember right. It was in New Mexico for sure. I'm pretty sure it was Chokecherry or Farmington. And we all showed up, and we're doing our same thing that we just party our asses off in the parking lot. And Shannon was there. Shannon pulls up in Pinky, and BFG like takes all his wheels and tires off, takes his boggers off, and puts on these. No, it was not BFG. It was Goodyear. So it was the Goodyear Wrangler, and they put those Goodyear Wranglers on. And I remember thinking to myself, those aren't going to get you anywhere, man. You got to have boggers. And sure, I think you won it. I don't remember. But apparently, you didn't have to have boggers.
Yeah, apparently.
So I digress. So I had this CJ5 buggy that I built for Tom Millen, and he'd let me take it to all the shows and use it if I needed to, and he was always having a good time with it. And it was a good showpiece, and we eventually got. I think I started running an ad. It's funny, I was talking to Mike Schaefer a month or two ago. I'd swung into his shop. I was up in that area, and he said, I forget how he worded it, but he was like, I was reading through the magazine, and you had all these, like, for lack of a better explanation, like professional ads, all these nice, like well-designed ads. And then I came across your ad for Fat City, and it was just it was my Jeep, like hanging a tire 8 feet in the air and just about to roll. I think a guy was actually pushing me back over, and and it just said Fat City Off-Road, custom chassis, roll cages, this and that. And then it had a little tag that said when in doubt, throttle out. That was all our little tagline all the time. And he goes, the second I saw that ad, I thought, God damn, that is so cool. And he says, that's when I decided I'm going to start my fab shop. and here's Schaefer, 20 something years later. And he's one of the, he's making money at it now. It probably took a long time to do, but he's
he survived. Yep.
He survived. Yeah. He kept with it. Good for him. So after that, I got, from that ad, I ended up, bringing in a guy named Kevin, and I can't remember his last name, Kevin. I'm drawing a blank on his last name for whatever reason, but, he went by Ramstein on,
yes,
on Pirate 4x4 forums, which at the time I didn't know what a forum was. So he had picked up this ad, and he wanted a 4-link in he had like a brand new Dodge, like 2500 or maybe it was a half ton, I forget, but brand new 4-wheel drive Dodge. And we did like coilovers and a 4-link and solid axle, like a Dana 60 or something up front. I forget what it was, and it was a cool Dodge. And it was his daily driver that he would tow stuff with. And after seeing the Jeep we built for Tom, Kevin wanted a similar Jeep, but he wanted coilovers and, a ZZ4, like a bigger, just a bigger, better Chevy and that kind of stuff. So we ended up building a Jeep, and I hate naming Jeeps. I'm super anti naming anything. But he called it Grape. He's like, it's got to have a name. He's like, I'm going to paint it purple. I want to call it Grape Nuts. And I was like, all right, that sounds stupid, but you're the one building the Jeep, so you're the one paying for it.
Painted, yep.
Yeah. But it was a cool Jeep, and it went through a few hands until it finally, guy rolled it over. The last guy, I don't know who owned it last, but it went from Kevin to a guy named Pete DePrimo, and then Pete sold it to another guy. And that guy was at Truck Haven, or where Tierra del Sol is held, a handful of years ago or more. And he rolled it. He like stuck it into a notch and rolled it almost all the way over, and the transmission leaked onto the exhaust and lit that thing up and burned to the ground, which was a shame because it was kind of a cool Jeep. But even funnier though, not funnier, nobody's gonna laugh at this but me, was I was out there on like my dirt bike. We were camped 30 miles away, and I was out on my dual sport just tearing ass around the desert, and in the distance I saw a big cloud of black smoke. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go see who's having a bad day. And I rolled up on it and like, oh, no kidding. I know that Jeep. That's so it just happened to, I got to be there when it was born, and I got to be there on its death day. So convenient. I mean, I could have been anywhere, but I ended up going to that black cloud of smoke and seeing that poor guy watch his life burn to the ground.
Yeah. That would suck.
Mm-hmm.
That would suck. So then at what point did John Reynolds come in?
Oh, so while I was actually still building Kevin's Jeep, I think, and I think it came from that ad too. So those magazine ads did pay off, I guess, because they were expensive and you had to commit to a 12-month deal or whatever back then. John Reynolds had called me. He had competed in, I think it was like the 24 hours at the Hammers when they were doing that, or one of those kinds of events in his Bronco.
Yep. He
had like a big, just modified Bronco on, I want to say it was on like 39s or something, but it was still a full-bodied, full-frame Bronco. And he wanted to build a new Bronco on like a rectangular tube chassis with coilovers and that kind of stuff. And at the time, I was building another tube chassis for myself, which was I was trying so hard to mix this rock crawling and desert stuff together. So I was building what essentially like appeared to be like a class 1, but was a class 1 buggy that was still with solid axles with 60 and a 44 and that kind of stuff. And while he was there, I'm like, well, what I'd like to do is, we should do, if we're going to build a full chassis, let's build a round tube chassis. I think, I can't remember exactly, but he was a horn player. So John, that little history on John, he played the French horn. I hope I'm getting that right, but he played the French horn, and he did like movie music, so the music that plays at any given time during a movie, at the end, at the beginning, whatever it was. And he did very well for himself doing that. And he didn't know, like, fabrication was not his game, which is, further down the road, he became such an impressive fabricator. I think that's one of the coolest stories ever, is he went from horn player to horn player / like really professional fabricator.
Right.
Anyway, so he wanted to build a Bronco. We talked him into a tube chassis and full body. We all had lots of ideas, and luckily he kind of let us run with it. There was probably some that he wasn't keen on. Like he wanted to be easy to get in and out. And I'm like, no, I want chassis, stiffness. So we need to, it needs to be rigid, and we can't have these goofy doors that all these people are doing. I just had a lot of strong opinions, I guess. And he had, what else? He had, he wanted to put a huge motor in it, and I forget what it was, but it was like a 500 horse. Back in those days, that was enormous power. So a huge Ford stroked thing. I don't know I forget what all the specs on it, but it was a bunch of power, and he had this idea to use, what kind of portal? Mercedes, what kind of portals?
The Unimog.
Unimog portals, yeah. So he had this guy that he'd somehow come in contact named Jack that worked at CTM, which was, I think it's like Central Tool and Machine. And so Axel Jack, so he has he goes, and he always talked about Axel Jack. Oh, Axel Jack says he's going to do this, and he's like they're working on these axles, and he would always call him Axel Jack, which would lead you to believe that like Jack just built axles. But after it was all said and done, he took this 9-inch housing and and mounted these Unimog portals on it and built this huge strap because the Unimog portals had like a weak housing. So he built this like 1-inch strap that he TIG welded around the portal itself so that it wouldn't explode the housing, or couldn't explode the housing. And when I finally, got to meet Jack, which I think was at the Hammer, I think we all went wheeling together. And Jack's like, he's like, yeah, don't tell Jack or John this, but like I've never built an axle in my life until he came to me. I was like, really? You're Axel Jack. How have you never done that? He goes, he's I can do anything. So we had, we built this. We wanted to keep it low and on big tires, but with tons of clearance with these portals, and we were going to have to run the 9-inch third member upside down, which is going to be like, there's a lot of oil. I don't think we knew anyone that had done that yet. So John, being pretty OCD, went home and probably spent 80 hours figuring out how to oil a 9-inch upside down by, he would I think we had to weld the little things in, but he would find a little fin, and he like, I want a fin right here inside the third member, so that it throws oil at this outer pinion bearing kind of thing. And I mean, he was super good at like engineering and figuring that stuff out. And I'm good at figuring things out, but I can't put that kind of time into it sometimes. And
right.
he was like, he was going to get it right, and he did. I don't think there was ever a failure. We welded everything in for him, and it threw oil where it needed to, ran it upside down, and that thing, it had so much clearance. Back in those days, it was so. I was always so surprised because you'd have like a 5-gallon jerry can, which you can't buy in California anymore. 5-gallon jerry can that sits 2.5 feet tall or whatever, and with 39-inch tires, this portal axle would just clear, the differential would clear right over it without even touching it. I'm like, man, that would be, back in those days, considered a very big rock, and you just drove right over it.
Without touching. No diff dragging.
Without even touching, yeah. And then, he wanted rear steer, which was, it wasn't totally new at that time because we'd done rear steer on one of the snipers, on Steve Moore's sniper to be exact.
Right.
But he had the money to buy like the right parts. So Steve's rear steer would work, but it was so agonizingly slow. And John Reynolds had figured out like, well, we need this much pressure through this PSC or whatever pump it was, but super high pressure pump, and to this size ram. And we put it on I forget what kind of valve we used. It was probably like a log splitter valve or something, but and that thing would go full lock to lock in like a second. So it was super, super fast. And it really made all the difference in the world, especially like at Top Truck Challenge. He won Top Truck Challenge with that Bronco. And there was one hill on those like those mud bog things that you do, and he set like a record time going through the tank trap. That's what it was called back then.
Right.
But there was one hill that you came out of the mud bog, and you had to, like, most people couldn't even make the hill. But if you looked at the tire tracks, the rear was just going lock to lock to lock to lock to lock, and it did it like 10 times in 8 feet, and just buzzed him right up over that thing. And that, you're like, oh man, that's a good thing. John was right. We need a bunch of power going to that thing. That was a really cool Bronco, and that was the same thing. I was always trying to mix a little bit of desert with a little bit of with a lot of rock crawling, I guess, back then.
It's awesome.
And again, still just following the footsteps that I'd been watching, like from Shannon and Randy Ellis and that kind of stuff. So I'm not making anything new. I'm just doing it in a different way, I guess.
Right. So now let's jump into transition from that Bronco into Ron Stobaugh and your Jeep speed efforts, and then the competitions and bets with Pirate, with Lance and everybody.
Yeah, Ron Stobaugh was good at getting me in a bunch of trouble. Still is. So in 2004, somewhere around there, I moved down to this area and went to work for, at the time it was like Superior Axle and Gear and Drivetrain Direct. And that's where I met Ron. And Chris Durham was actually involved in that a little bit at the time. So I knew Danny Grimes for so long because he was originally from Santa Paula, which was right next to Ventura.
Yep.
And Danny hooked me up with Chris Durham. And Durham was like, yeah, we're looking for a drivetrain guy. So I went down and interviewed and got that job. And after a while, I think I'd always wanted to go desert racing. And that was about the time like Jeep Speed had actually popped up a few years before that, but it was super small at the time. And Jeep Speed, for anyone that doesn't know, is just a Class 4. At the time, it was just a Class 4 XJ Cherokees. It was super limited, but it was super affordable, so it was something I could do. So I built this Jeep Cherokee, and now I'm a desert racer, and I'm spending every dime I ever made on desert racing, which I always tell. I've got some neighbor kids that race their side-by-sides, and I'm like, you got to stop doing that. You save your money, idiots. But, so now I'm desert racing, and eventually I go to work. Ron started Alloy USA, and I go to work for Ron. And like a few weeks before SEMA of, I don't know, 2005, I think. A few weeks before SEMA, we had raced some like more race or I forget what there was another, the one where the accident had NDR, Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
And there was the infamous wall jump, which is part of it, part of the race course. And it's basically it's just like a 3 or 4 foot ledge, but when you hit that thing, it sends you. And I had picked up, I think I picked up, Ron had sponsored me before I went to work for him. So anyway, so I don't know where that all gets jumbled together, but we hit, I'd stripped out a spool. So I was running in 2-wheel drive, but 1-wheel drive, and I could barely keep the damn Jeep going. It got stuck twice already in the sand. And so I was basically pissed. And I was driving the wheels off this Jeep. Either I was going to kill it or it was going to kill me. And I hit that wall at full speed, man. The Jeep probably, even if it had actual 2-wheel drive, if the spool hadn't broken, I don't think the Jeep would have gone any faster because I never lifted for miles and the thing was just carrying speed the whole time. And I hit that thing and it sends this stupid Jeep Cherokee of mine like, I don't know, 12 feet in the air or something like that.
The photo looks like it.
Yeah. It was, I actually, when I was in it, I think I was just tunnel visioned and just so pissed off. But my co-driver, Luke Weir, when we finally landed,
landed.
He's like, dude, I was looking at the top, looking down at the tops of people's heads. And I was like, really? Didn't feel that bad to me. I think we actually just landed right because we landed into another set of whoops. So we kind of landed on the downhill side of a whoop and then it shot us back up again. But I think if we'd have flat landed that, we'd both be in wheelchairs right now, unfortunately. But so after that stupid little jump got a bunch of attention because it was super cool pictures. And we're at SEMA. That Jeep's broken because I only went like another mile and it just broke all the mounts right out of the motor. Broke all the bolts sheared off them and the motor dropped on the axle. So you're not supposed to jump Cherokees 12 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So anyways, we're at SEMA. It's like a week before Baja. I've never even been to Mexico. And Ron Stobaugh starts smack talking Lance and Eric Camo, because they had recently bought I forget whose they bought. They bought Jason LaFortune's Jeep, I think. So they
Yes.
had recently bought a Jeep, or they've been racing it for a little while maybe. And so Ron starts smack talking these guys, and that's where he came up with the Baja beer bet. And we would run that as kind of a, it was kind of a marketing ploy, but at the same time, Pirate 4x4 had a lot of following back then, so, and everybody was still active. But like, I think I had 3 or 4 days to prep that Jeep and then put it on a trailer and cross the border to Mexico, which I'd never done before. And we're going to go race Lance and Camo in this Baja 1000, this famous Baja 1000 that I'd always dreamt about. I just didn't dream it would be 3 days later. And man, I'll tell you, that was such a learning experience. I had Brad Lovell was my co-driver. He'd never been to Baja. I don't know if he'd ever been to Baja. He definitely never raced Baja before that. And we took off, and I remember like the first 30 miles. Also, the first time I got to meet Bob Bauer, which I love that guy. That guy's awesome too.
He is. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge, and you could write a book about that guy, or he could write a book about him. I mean, it's just an impressive character. But anyway, so the like first 30 miles, I remember talking to Bob for the first time I ever met him. He goes, well, here, and Ron brought me over to him and said, hey, Eric, this is Bob Bauer. He's got a couple things he wants to say to you. He's a really smart guy. And I said, all right, hey, Bob, how you doing? And he goes, well, here's what you want to do. I know you're all like hot to trot. So when you take off of that, start line, like, just shut it down. Take off like a bat out of hell. Give them a show right there, and then shut it down. And he says, get yourself a good 30 miles under your belt, settle down, tighten your belts up, and when you get to Ojos Negros, is that right? Ojos? Yeah, Ojos.
Yeah, Ojos.
Get to Ojos, then you can open it up and go race it. But man, give yourself 30 miles to really settle in. And I still think of that every time, because anytime I take the start, I'll take it easy. It's, you don't win that race between start and Ojos. So you just get your belts, you get comfortable, you get used to all those sounds that you think you're hearing and haven't been detrimental yet, and just get over it. And I think so I now have, and I credit Bob's wisdom to that. I've got 5 different Baja 1000 wins, 5 Baja 1000 wins in 4 different classes. That particular Baja beer bet, though, we lost to Eric and Camo, or Lance and Camo. But yeah, those are all, I love reflecting on those times, because not only did I learn so much, but it was just such a good time. And, I got a lot of people to thank for that too. Like, Ron was a big part of it. I don't think I'd ever would probably never have gotten a chance, or as many other chances as I've got. Because I think I've raced 1,000 like 15 times now. If it wasn't for like Ron Stobaugh sticking his neck out there and helping, sponsor the very first race.
There's a lot of us that can say that about Ron. Ron was one of our first sponsors with CalRocks, with let's see, it was Superior, then Alloy.
Alloy, and then we bought Precision later on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, he got me down there with because of all that on Pirate. I ended up down there with Pirate, with Lance and Camo and Rogie and all those guys, and then Schaefer, and then with Pistol Pete, and there's some great times down there.
Yeah, Pistol, man. His anniversary it'll be 2 years now that he passed away on Tuesday, so just a few days away from now.
Is it? It's that soon. Shoo.
Yeah, 2 years already. We'll talk about him. I loved Pistol, man. Pete Soren was such a fucking solid guy, man. Everybody realized how much they liked him after he passed, which is always unfortunate. But just such a terrific person.
Exactly. Let's go into real quick the cartoon video for Ultra 4.
Oh,
and then the Hitler video.
Yeah. I don't know which one's my favorite.
I don't either. I think I enjoy them both. They're so different with the whole thing. But I don't know how you came up with that. I don't know. I know you have a great sense of humor,
Yeah, well, it's just me smack talking through a cartoon.
But it's so appropriate.
Yeah, it does. I always laugh how everybody feels, or it still is, but it's how everyone always remembers just how um, uh, still accurate it is to this day. And that had to be 10 years ago, or I don't know, a long, long time ago, whatever it was.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. Um, and then the Hitler one, which what came the next year,
No, 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 just like a month later.
a
It's the
month
same.
later.
Yeah.
We figured that
Couldn't
you were
get
drinking a
longer.
lot of margaritas when you did those.
Yeah. My favorite part of the Hitler one is was when he was talking about whoever it was that threw a rock at
Randy?
was it Randy? Yeah.
Yeah.
So whoever it was that threw a rock, and he says if we didn't look dumb enough, you threw that rock like a pussy or something like that. And then it cuts to the two girls, and she puts her hand on the other girl and goes, "It's okay. You threw it as hard as you could." I'm still cracking myself up, but mostly just for that one part.
Oh Lord.
But yeah,
So
I do always appreciate seeing those pop back up, and it always right around this time, right before the race, and it's still true to this day. There's a bunch of them still, putting motors in, and you got to be on a lake bed in a week.
exactly, and it's almost like Bob Bauer's, being careful in Baja,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
in taking precautions and stuff. It's they're as famous as that,
Yeah.
at least to
Yeah.
the rock donkeys.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So
And that's
go ahead.
well, I would say that the Bob Bowers advice still follows suit, I think, in King of the Hammers. No one wins it in that first 2 miles, but a lot of them try.
Correct. The difference in at KOH is racing down in Baja is that the pit crews are a lot safer at KOH than they are
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
in Baja.
A lot more rules. I mean, in Baja, technically, I mean, there are rules, but really, there's no rules.
I know
Uh,
that racing with pistol, we had a rule, and it
oh,
was never to drive over 55.
yes. Which he would end up with some donkeys a lot of the time that, because he was always trying to scrape together a crew. And I mean, he lost a lot of chase trucks down in Baja.
Yeah, I only lost him a
But
mirror one time. The Honda,
that's not bad, man. You get asked to come back if you only lose a mirror.
the Honda team, their van going the opposite direction in road construction, going
Uh-huh.
down to San Felipe, you had to drop off and get off the highway because they were building it, and it was all dirt road. Got to this real narrow spot, and I'm completely dead stopped, and they come by me going the other direction at probably 25 in their van, 30 miles an hour, and smacked the mirror.
Oh, no
And if
kidding.
I could have
That,
gotten turned around, I would have chased them down because I was so pissed.
we had, I remember, I guess it's been long enough to tell the tale. Stovall was racing our Jeep. I think it was the 500. Actually, it was definitely the Baja 500. We were racing my Jeep, and Ron was driving, and I think he just kissed it or just clipped something like a spectator car or something. And he came into the pits yelling at everybody, "Get your stickers off the windows, get your stickers off the window. You don't want any whatever our number was, 1702 or 01 or something like that. Get them off, get all your stickers off the window. I clipped a car back there." uh,
I can't wait to get Stoba on this. I've been asking him since last April, and just have not found the time to do it. So next time you talk to him, tell him he's got to get on here.
yeah, okay, you're gonna have to make it like a 4 hour long thing.
Oh yeah,
Stovall's got stories.
oh yeah. So then your gig now is with Motive Gear. We talked about a little bit about that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what is the position that you hold with them?
I always say I wear every there's a couple of us or a handful of us that are pretty key players anyway. I mean, we have our VPs. I mean, everybody's a key player. That's me being politically correct. But as far as like brand management and product development, that kind of stuff, there's 5 or 6 of us that are really not only in charge of that, but we're also like enthusiasts. We've got a couple drag racers, hot rodders. I'm a desert guy. My buddy Jeff Belknap is a desert guy, and rock crawlers and that kind of stuff. So we I always say we wear every hat, from product development to like marketing. We do all the shows. We handle all the sponsorships. I do inside sales and outside sales, and still handle when I'm in the office. I'm like on the tech line nonstop, because differential work it's not rocket science, but a lot of people think it is. So you got to walk a lot of people off the cliff. But so we do it all. But we've got our our VPs and that kind of stuff. I don't even know what my title is. I like not having a title. But I really do like, we're one of the only true manufacturers in the business. There's lots of other brands, but they're all just buying like third party, and we're the only ones that are technically, Motive Gear is really the only one technically vested in our manufacturing plant. So we can actually control our quality, control our quality control, as opposed to bringing in whatever the other guy sold us and then we check it and then move it into a box. We make our parts.
Awesome.
Yeah. But so, and then, like you'll see me at all the shows because, I'm the off-road guy, and the desert is dirty and I like that stuff. And it's, it's not everybody's cup of tea. So,
right.
But yeah, I always tell people I've got the best job in the world. I've got no complaints. I like the people I work with, super loyal to the brand because I know what kind of quality we put out there. And I don't know, this is where I'll, if I die before I retire, this is either where I'll die or where I'll retire.
Excellent. So
yeah,
you're the last couple of times I've seen you, you've been wheeling a flat fender.
Oh yeah,
And
I've got everything. So what I have is everything, which is too many things. So I've got my pre-runner, and I've got I've got a little TJ for rock crawling. I've got my flat fender for rock crawling, but I've got a bone stock 1946 flat fender, CJ2A. And, it's still got a flathead 4-cylinder in it, and stock axles, stock transfer case, stock everything, except I put Lockrights in it, front and rear. And I just tear ass in that thing. It's so much fun because, like, every year at the Hammers, I usually bring it down for KOH, and there's every Toyota and goofball and a JK on 40s that can't get through Chocolate Thunder. I take this stupid little stock flat fender on 28-inch tires, and I got to work. It's not easy, that's for sure, but I'll run it up Chocolate Thunder and then honk the horn at the top, and you get the cheers, and that's what makes me smile.
That's awesome.
I guess if everybody booed, I'd be like, I'm going to sell this thing.
Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share?
Boy, that is a great question.
Got any builds that you're looking at doing, or?
No, what I'm trying. Well, I'm all grown up these days. I'm in my mid 40s now, and I've got a 6-year-old and a 6-year-old boy and a 12-year-old daughter that I like to just poke fun of, and I'm trying to just essentially bring them up. Most of my stuff is, when it's not work, it's family anymore. So it's
Good.
I've got a motorhome and way too many dirt bikes and too many Jeeps, and let the kids drive those things and ride the wheels off their dirt bikes, and it's just it's a different in reflection. When I was younger, everything was kind of about me or being or competing or that kind of thing. And anymore, I really do focus on, although my wife disagrees. She'll say that I don't spend enough time with them, but she doesn't know what she's talking about.
She won't listen to this. That's okay.
She won't listen. Yeah. But so I spend more time out in the desert, with my kids, and we go camping, almost every weekend. And that's kind of my gig now. I still like rock crawling. Well, what? I was just at the Hammers back in September or October, and I was just out there, and I remember I used to drive a CJ7 when I was in my early 20s. I'd drive a CJ7 on 33s, and we'd go run on the Hammers. We'd run all the trails, and it was on the T5 with a Terra Low on the transfer case, and we just eat up those trails and had such a good time. And then I just went back and ran, I think it was either Jack or Sledge. It's the one on the left.
Okay.
And I ran that in my TJ, at like 2 a.m. because I'm an idiot. And about halfway through, I was like, oh my God, I forgot how big these goddamn rocks. I mean, these rocks are so big these days. And I was like, we turn around right now. It's going to take us just as long to get out as it does to go forward. But if we break something, man, we're screwed. I was like, how come I haven't grown out of this yet? You know, come on, damn it, Eric, you're a grown up now.
I like to tell everybody I'm a scenic wheeler.
Yeah, I always joke around with Brad Lovell. I said, I'm a professional pre-runner. Leave me alone.
It's safer and less expensive that way.
Yeah, totally. You know who else you should get on this one day would be my buddy Ian Lozablad with his he's got, you know, I'm sure you've seen Big Willie, the two scale or whatever you want to call it, 2-to-1 scale flat fender.
Right.
I mean, I used to co-dog or a spot for him back in the ARCA days and that kind of stuff. He would know all. He'd probably have all the same stories, but either way, just told in a different way. They're always fun.
Well, why don't you shoot me his contact information, and I'll look at putting him on. That's for sure. Getting him on my list at least.
Yeah, he's one of my, and he's on. I mean, we've got a big group of flat fender dorks now because now we're like a. I always laugh when somebody calls us elitist flat fenders because nobody ever said elitist and flat fender in the same sentence.
Only when they were talking about Payway back in the day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Payway's one. You know, he's one of our flat fender dorks. We do a lot of fun runs. Occasionally Payway comes out, and even Randy Ellis has one now, or he's
Ryan Miller.
Yeah, Miller's got one. There's a bunch of them. We did Ian Lozablad actually put it all together, but it was the what he calls the Go Devil run, and it's flathead, flat fender only. And it's like all stalkers, and we basically just party our way through the desert and go do some fun obstacles and that kind of stuff. But the intention was like to take a picture. If you took a picture at any given time and then just turned it black and white, it should technically look like we were in the 40s. And so I don't have any cowboy wear because that's when I think of the 40s, my mind goes straight to cowboys. But all those Arizona guys have cowboy wear because they're all shit kickers. But so any pictures with those guys in it, it does, man. It looked, it's just a bunch of stock flat fenders with dorks driving them and cowboy hats and stuff.
Actually, we did an article. We ran an article in 4 Low that Ryan Miller put together on the Go Devil run. Yep. That's
right. Yeah. So I read that. Yeah. Yeah, the other one I just read from 4 Low, and kudos for bringing back and putting on such a high quality magazine, Rich.
Oh, thank you.
But the other one I ran, and I just ran part of it, and I was thinking flat fender in my head the whole time. But you guys did the Peace Trail, the Arizona Peace Trail?
Yeah, we did from 60 back around to Yuma.
Yuma, okay, yeah, Yuma. Yeah, we just did it at New Year's. We were trying to get out of California because they got all the camping is shut down in California for COVID. But we wanted to get out of California, so we headed to Quartzsite, Arizona. I went from Quartzsite and ran the Peace Trail all the way to Parker Desert Bar. And just that trail system is super cool.
It is. I want to do that. That's the next part I want to do. Except my Raptor was nice and had just a few little pinstripes. It's now going to get wrapped.
I tell you, so my pre-runner is probably a little bit wider than your Raptor, and I was on the outside of those trails the whole time, or my tires were on the outside of the trail the whole time, and that's where all the chop was from the side-by-sides and stuff that go through there. And it literally, it was shaking my pre-runner to pieces. It broke two of the, basically the same part, but the bed sides basically broke off when I was done with it. But
wow,
still a great trail. And the only reason I'd read about it in your magazine, I was like, oh, that's where I'm going. We're going to go run those trails.
Well, good. I'm glad that was some motivation for you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So see, it's working.
Yep. Love to hear that. So ever since we had Fred Williams on, he asked me a question. I love Fred. So I throw it out there now to my guests. Is there a question that you want to ask me?
What do you think, where do you think the actual technical rock crawling technology will go next? As far as there's Cody's cars and I don't know if Jesse made his last one. That stuff that Jesse Haynes is doing is really, really super cool for rock crawling.
Oh, the new portals and everything, and the
Yeah.
balances he's getting and stuff.
Like, how do you advance on that? Where's the next thing? I feel like, I mean, there's always smarter people than I am for sure. So there's got to be a next level. Where do you think it's at? Like, and you're seeing it up front. So, and I'm sure paying very close attention to it. How are these cars going to get better without giving anyone ideas?
I think that what guys are doing now is with the portal technology that they're able to go to lighter and lighter drivetrains. So
Yeah.
there's actually somebody out there, Kevin Reimer, that has built his unlimited buggy using Suzuki axles and using all Suzuki drivetrain, from what I understand.
Okay.
So he's going super lightweight. I think you're going to see a lot of that happening, just to get lighter and lighter and lighter, and they're going to make qualifying weight by, what's in the tires, kind of like Tiny did originally. But
Yeah.
I think you're going to see the next big thing will be EV, electric vehicle.
Oh.
I think you're going to see guys come out with kind of like what Tony K did originally. He was the first one to build an electric vehicle, but it was way too early. The technology for EV is so much farther advanced now, that somebody's going to cough up the money and put something together that will be not only form but function properly.
All right. That'll be interesting to see, because I like I assume you can actually keep a small enough battery if you have enough batteries and swap them out between like courses, so you don't have to add a ton of weight.
Yeah, because all you need is about 10, 12 minutes of runtime.
Yeah, exactly.
And then have the batteries on a quick connect tray or something and just slide them in and out. I see it happening.
One thing I am always really curious about, and it falls right into my wheelhouse here. There's a guy named Brennan Metcalf out of Durango, Colorado, and he always kicks around. He's an engine nerd, and he always kicks around. Really nice guy. I say that with love. But he always kicks around the theory of super deep gearing in the differential or even the outers, as opposed to in the transfer case for the way the suspension reacts. And I think that is something. He always wants us at Motive Gear to make a crazy deep 8-to-1 or high or lower gear for like a Dana 60 and that kind of thing, which Motive Gear loves. We love to be the innovators on that kind of stuff. But I also, when I bring that to them, I've got to be like, and we're going to sell 200 of them or 400 of them. I can't just be like, we should make this and give it to Brendan. But it always leads me to believe like Jason at Tuberks would come up with something really good, or even Brendan would come up with something really good. Would be like an underdrive that mounts on the the front of the housing, the front of the yoke, or your front of the pinion, and then comes out with the yoke. And that would be one way to deepen that gear,
right,
and semi-affordably. But I always appreciate seeing what Brennan throws out there. It's just sometimes it's not cost effective.
Right. No, I've been following his stuff too, and he is a super nice guy and very, very knowledgeable, very smart, way beyond me. I'm not an engineer type. Luckily, I married an accountant that is really good with books, because that's one reason fab shops never make it. All those hundreds of guys that started fab shops, because they're great fabricators, but they don't know how to run a business.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to say thank you so much for coming on board this morning and spending some time and getting this done. And I think we got a really killer interview here, and I think people are going to enjoy it.
Oh, well, right on, Rich, man. I really appreciate you asking me or having me on, man.
And have fun at the Hammers.
Oh, yeah. Don't see you out there at all?
Nope, I'm not making it this year.
Because you're way back east right now, huh?
Yeah, we're in Texas. We have a couple of photographers that'll be covering the event for us, and then we'll see everybody hopefully at Easter Jeep. They're still planning that and going ahead with everything.
Yeah, we are planning on that's everything's day by day with work, but I always assume we're planning to be at Easter Jeep. So Excellent. Hopefully everything stays on a good course for all of us, and all this stuff, goes back to normalizes itself again.
Yeah, I don't want to think about any other possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Eric,
Right
take care.
So I really appreciate it, man. And you have a fantastic morning, and we will see you out on the trail hopefully soon, man.
All right. Sounds good, Eric. Thank you.
All right, take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.